The Democracy Forum brings you another not-to-be-missed webinar. She's China, Emergence of a Modern Tech-Enabled Authoritarianism. Under Xi Jinping's leadership, China has increasingly leveraged technological developments, both for economic gain and to enhance the state's ability to monitor and manage its population. How are China's advances in surveillance reinforcing its model of control domestically? Are they shaping governance practices beyond its borders? Is digital authoritarianism likely to spread globally? And what can democratic societies learn from the Chinese experience of digital governance? To consider these and related questions, tune into our live debate, bringing your questions and comments for our expert panel.
Mr. Humphrey, you are muted somehow. You need to unmute yourself.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are unmuted. Please start again. Sorry.
Okay, I do apologize for that technical thing. We start again. Hello and welcome. I am Humphrey Hawksley. This is a Democracy Forum debate where we argue, discuss, and determine issues and often sit at the crosshairs of all our lives. Today, Xi's China, emergence of a modern tech-enabled authoritarianism. Xi Jinping, feared by many in the West, wanting to overturn the world order and doing it with robots, cameras, semiconductors, and winning by getting ahead with technology and also using it to control his vast population. Can the West compete with that technology? And how much of it violates our own democratic principles? Here in Britain, we have yet to define what China is. As the recent headlines have been saying, is it an enemy, a challenge, or a rival? Does it matter? What exactly is going on? To tell us, we have a fantastic panel: Lynnette, Carwyn, Morris, Ariane, Ollier-Malaterre. And to bring it all together at the end, our Democracy Forum chair, Barry Gardiner, is with us. But before any of that, I have the privilege of asking Democracy Forum President, Lord Charles Bruce, to lay out the canvas and the background of our debate. Lord Bruce, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar, which will investigate the Chinese state's use of digital authoritarianism, enabling it to capture key strategic markets overseas, to subvert internet freedoms, while also suppressing dissent at home. I'd like to acknowledge the forum for identifying such a critical and relevant topic for the webinar and for inviting such an erudite panel of speakers to participate. I'm very grateful that Humphrey Hawksley has agreed to act as moderator for today's session. Over the last decade, China's senior political leadership has repeatedly justified the role of state agencies in the collection and control of data for the purpose of managing society. In 2013, Xi Jinping clearly explained that data is synonymous with control, saying that, I quote, "whoever controls data has the upper hand." And when launching the Made in China 2025 plan 2 years ago, he emphasized that, I quote, "control of data is key to the nation's ambitions." Indeed, a comprehensive legal framework exists to underpin China's development as a techno-authoritarian superpower, embracing the use of digital security cards, digital money, smart cities, surveillance cameras, and a social credit system where the citizens are, I quote, "monitored and directed to an unprecedented degree through the agency of government-controlled cyber networks, surveillance systems, and algorithms." the invasive nature of the resulting social control is evident in the rolling out of smart cities and digital grid management. By 2020, there were over 800 smart cities in China, either under construction or in planning, around 50% of the world's total development, with an average rate of installation of 8,000 closed-circuit television cameras per square mile. As The Economist predicts, China's ultimate goal, I quote, appears to be to create an integrated national data ocean, covering not just consumers, but industrial and state activity too. The new approach looks a lot like a paradise for Big Brother. And furthermore, in a throwback to the neighborhood committees created in the early years of the People's Republic of China over 75 years ago, China has now been divided into 1 million separate grids, each of 1,000 residents, and each controlled by centralized surveillance. As the MacArthur Institute explains, I quote, "It's all about getting this new governance structure to work, to get deeper into the fine capillaries of society." And interviewed in 2016 by the Washington Post, Roger Creemers, professor of law at Leiden University, suggests that, I quote, "a huge part of Chinese political theater is to claim that there is an idealized future, a utopia to head towards. And now with technological developments that allow for the vast collection and processing of information, there is much less distance between the loftiness of the party's ambition and its hypothetical capability of actually doing something." Well, it's that something that the panel will be addressing this afternoon, and I really look forward to hearing their comments. If you have any questions, please pass them to the panel through the chair.
Lord Bruce, thank you very much for that. The capillaries of society, digital authoritarianism, key strategic markets overseas, and suppressing dissent at home. Our first speaker is Professor Lynnette Ong, China and Asia specialist at the University of Toronto, who researches authoritarianism, political and social contention, and development. Her new book will be Outsourcing Surveillance, Online Opinion Management in China, which will demonstrate how the Chinese state outsources digital surveillance to private and for-profit firms. That's not really communism, is it? Her other writings, many writings in the way China governs, includes material and research about land grabs and thugs for hire. Seize China, Emergence of a Modern Tech-Enabled Authoritarianism. Lynnette Ong, share with us your thoughts.
Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon to the audience in the UK, and good morning to people on the East Coast. So today I would like to share some findings from my forthcoming book manuscript titled Outsourcing Surveillance, Online Opinion Management in China. So together with my co-authors, we analyze how the Chinese state tries to shape and influence public opinions expressed on Chinese social media. So it is very much a form of manipulation of information in order to achieve states' objectives. But when the manipulation of information is conducted within domestic online sphere, it is essentially a form of online surveillance. And we find that surveillance and censorship in China is largely outsourced to third-party for-profit corporations. That is to say that the state actually doesn't do it, in this case because the state doesn't have the capacity, doesn't have the technical capacity to do it, so it decides to outsource to for-profit corporations, and that has spawned a multi-billion industry to cater to state demands. So public opinions, it's very much a double-edged sword in a country like China. Given limited channels for gathering citizens' preferences, public opinion data allows the Chinese leaders to gauge public sentiments and to become more responsive to citizens' demand. But they can also spiral out of control and destabilize the regime. Therefore, analysis of management of online opinions provide a critical window into understanding how the Chinese state conducts digital repression and also how it exercises digital statecraft. We scraped thousands of public procurement documents from a Chinese government website. So these procurement documents, right, they are issued by party government agencies at the national as well as various sub-national levels, like municipality, prefecture, county level cities, and so on. So you have the procurers, which are government procurers, and party procurers. They articulate on the document how they have intended to manage online expression of public opinion about their own agencies, right? And solicit bids from all sorts of corporations to provide that sort of services. So you have procurers, state procurers on the one hand, as well as providers on the other hand. So by an analysis of this sort of procurement data will then open up a Pandora's box of how state and businesses actually works in China. We found that the Chinese state has outsourced various functions of online surveillance to 3 types of providers. These are the private companies, these are public sector organizations such as universities, as well as for-profit arms of state-owned media companies such as the People's Daily or Xinhua Daily, which you might have heard of. They often have a for-profit department that provide technical solution to cater to states' agencies' demand. And these corporations are extensively involved in the surveillance of public opinions on behalf of the party state. So state outsourcing of these services, like I've mentioned, have spawned a multi-billion renminbi for-profit industry that specializes in the management, surveillance, and moderation of online public opinion, just to cater to the demand of the state. Our empirical investigation of these public procurement documents also reveal what services are being solicited, how the services will be provided, monetary value of the transactions, as well as the location of service providers, as well as procurers. So by managing public opinion, we mean monitoring of expression, right? Analyzing online content, detecting politically sensitive posts, and deciding whether the posts violate rules, and if they do, determine the course of actions, including handing out punishment. So just let me give you a glimpse of what we have found. So this is a Sankey diagram that maps different types of procurers on your left to different types of providers on your right. So this is stage one. Stage one is about detection as well as monitoring of online posts. So typically uniformly provided across. There's not much tailor-made type of services. So the providers could sell you a software that allows you to detect and monitor posts that people talk about your agency. So you could see that a lot of people will go to private companies to get this sort of software, and some would go to state-owned enterprises, and some would go to public sector organizations. Stage 3 is about an analysis and judgment. So it's more manual, more labor intensive, that requires some sort of human judgment. And because of that reason, you also see kind of more procurers going to state-owned providers compared to the first stage. The third stage, which is the final stage, is about case handling and punishment. So the higher the stages, the more politically sensitive it is. So you can see that in the third, which is the most politically sensitive stage, more and more contracts would then go to state-owned enterprises. And because these state-owned enterprises are typically located in Beijing, they have better access to the central leadership, and they could finesse the cases and then present it as a positive case to the central leadership, which might actually be politically favorable to the local agencies, which might get into trouble because there is some online mass incidents that have happened in their jurisdiction. So through text analysis of government procurement contracts, we found evidence of state solicitation of various technical services throughout the stages of online opinion management. In the very first stage of detection and monitoring, procurers often look to acquire software that automate these services. So this is an example of the contract from the first stage. So procurers will look for software that help to automate these service, that help to issue preventive warnings when there's a sensitive post that comes up, and provides standard reporting. So this sort of preventive warning then allows them to know in advance if things come up and what sort of course of action they should be taking. Stage 2 then looks at, it's also preemptive in nature. It seeks technical expertise in risk and crisis assessment. So this is about assessment of political risk involved and social risk, as well as the degree of crisis. The thing to note is that, if there's an explosion of discussion about certain incidents or accidents that happened in China, people and the agencies that you are in charge is the subject of debate. It might actually put the political career of that government official or government leader in trouble. So as far as possible, they are trying to preempt and moderate these sort of discussions. But more importantly, if someone in your jurisdiction call for collective action, let's say they try to mobilize people to turn up to the town square this weekend, People's Square this weekend, to stage some sort of protest, it is very important for the regional leaders be able to preempt that and then preempt collective action in advance. And the last stage is really about procurers establishing partnership with trusted and well-established for-profit subsidiaries of state-owned media providers such as Xinhua Daily that have the requisite technical infrastructure to provide rapid crisis responses, the political networks to elevate the status of the procurers and then put them in favorable light. It's a very labor-intensive type of approach in the very last stage. It's also politically sensitive. Most of it is done in-house. Those that are outsourced are typically outsourced to Beijing-based large state-owned media companies. So I will leave it here, but let me sum up that what we are trying to understand is how the Chinese state conducts digital statecraft in the age of digital era. So I study kind of outsourcing of repression. My motivation is how does the state outsource repression and how does it conduct statecraft in the digital era? And we do it by analyzing how the state procures this sort of surveillance services through an analysis of public procurement documents. So I'll leave it here and welcome discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Lynnette, very much for that. Could I just try to separate off that very good detailed explanation you gave of the outsourcing and the capabilities of that? How different is that to what we're doing in the West?
Okay, my understanding is, I think most Western countries, they do not monitor public opinions the way that the Chinese state does, because the Chinese party state is paranoid about dissent. Okay. We are not, or not supposed to be, right? At least in Canada. And number two, there is a for-profit industry in China that caters to state and party demands because of the sheer size of demand. And in Canada, there are software companies, there are technical companies, but they don't provide these sort of services to government agencies.
Okay. Thank you for that. We have a question from Rashid Ali that I'll put to you. Is the ability of advancing technologies to strengthen social control and suppress dissent likely to curb the innovation and entrepreneurialism that China needs to feed its huge economy?
That is a very interesting question, and I think it cuts both ways. The innovation and entrepreneurialism actually helps to create technology necessary to exert state control. So you look at WeChat, Weixin, and Alipay, and so on. Those are private technology companies. But once they become huge scale, the government can often co-opt them for social control purposes.
Right.
So, it's a vicious cycle in a way.
Because that could stop debate. And just before I let you go, in 2 seconds, how much further ahead are they? Because you're reading everything that they've got robots in every factories, that we're going to rely on them for our green energy. So how much further ahead is China technically than we are here in the West?
I think the level of kind of technology is debatable. In the West, you have, Google, Facebook, Meta, those very high-tech companies. But I think the nature of state-business relationship is very different in China than in the West. In China, the state can co-opt these private corporations. If you refuse to listen to the party can come and check on your taxes and accuse you of tax evasion, and in a way could shut down the company. So private companies are always hijacked, and then they had to listen to the party one way or the other. So there's no kind of sheer independent private entrepreneurship to speak of, no autonomous private entrepreneurship at the end of the day.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Stay with us because we will be coming back to you, Lynnette. And our next speaker, we're going to Dr. Carwyn Morris, Senior Lecturer in Digital Society and Geography at SOAS, University in London, and an expert in China's social media, the instant messaging, the gaming, the leisure, the news sharing, the food, I think, as well. But here's the twist. With Western democracies dithering about how to govern the internet, with online disinformation, propaganda, the teenagers on the phones, all the poisoning of democracy and public debate. Is China perhaps a step ahead in its digital authoritarianism? Carwyn Morris, tell us what you know.
Hey, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
So in my comments today, I'll be discussing things mostly related to social media, although I do have experience with offline surveillance practices as well. I want to start my reflections by saying that I am very much opposed to the form that digital governance has taken in China. Furthermore, since I began my academic journey, I have been trying to highlight that democratic governments around the world need to look at what is going on in China, as China is one future we could move towards, and it is, in governance terms, ahead. Many people I spoke to try to argue that while repressive digital governance happens in China, it couldn't happen over here because we are democratic, freedom-loving countries. I suggested that we were just one bad president, one bad prime minister, or one oligarch away from a repressive turn in governance. And if that happened, we did not have the legal frameworks to protect us from a repressive turn. At the same time, we need to be careful of myths, such as the digital Silk Road or the many rumors around social credit systems. And together with Roger Creemers and Vincent Brisset, I'm also analyzing policy documents from China to understand these things. But in my opinion, democracies like the UK need to learn from China. They need to help stop repression spreading, but they cannot do that without local dynamic policy. So my research focuses on how social media impacts the city. And that means that my research has explored how migrants in Beijing produce food-based entrepreneurial communities using digital technologies, and how they are displaced, and how food businesses in Dusseldorf, Germany use Chinese social media to support a flourishing cultural sector that draws in visitors from across Europe. But within this, I also conduct research with Chinese activists, both in Europe and in China, including anti-eviction activists in Beijing, feminist activists in China and Europe, and activists pushing for change in governance in China, including neo-Maoist, neo-Marxist, and social democratic activists in China. I have conducted research with people who have been tortured, who have been imprisoned without due process, who have claimed asylum in other countries due to their political actions, and who have had their identities erased by the Chinese government before being given a new identity after leaving prison, a quite chilling mode of erasure and governance made possible due to digital systems. Digital surveillance technologies are essential to the policing operations that resulted in torture, imprisonment, the necessity for asylum, and the erasure of identities. This might be 100 pages of WeChat logs presented by police to students in interrogation rooms, or social media posts made on non-Chinese owned platforms being used to detain people or scare their families. Surveillance is at the heart of everything repressive here. Without surveillance, there is no censorship, no deletion, no shadow banning, and no great firewall. In fact, for many, due to online surveillance efforts, many activists I engage with will meet offline whenever possible. They use a tactical rejection of the online. They use online tools to share information and to start something, and they move everything else offline because of surveillance. New modes of surveillance are being used, and algorithmic or artificial intelligence tools have been part of this for many years. But my first caveat, we cannot be techno-deterministic about this. Many of these systems function well because they are in physical and digital environments tailored for surveillance to function. In field work I did in North Beijing, I noticed how pavements were changed, entrance to buildings were closed, fences and walls were erected to force people to move through surveillance choke points. The same thing is done with social media. By restricting access to global instant messaging and social media and giving Chinese companies enough freedom to make pleasant and fun social media environments, a form of surveillance choke point is being created where surveillance becomes much easier. This is not necessarily about technology. It is about government capacity to alter the lived environment, both physical and digital environments, and to make surveillance both pleasant and possible. Looping back to the beginning of what I said, this is a legal and legislative issue. These technologies of surveillance, which can lead to so much oppression, are relatively neutral, and they can also protect the repressed as well. They can give the repressed an opportunity to have a voice in another space as well. What matters is how they are used. And in the Chinese context, through a mixture of digital territory and digital sovereignty, abuse is made simple. But abuse is easier because these systems are fun for most of the people. They are just scary for some. Most people I know have never been questioned by the police or tortured, but then I know some people who have. Democracies can learn from this, and they must. I am a big advocate for the development of digital sovereignty, and we must not confuse digital governance and digital sovereignty with the repressive outcomes we see in China. Democracies must learn from China. They must develop their own regimes of digital sovereignty that can shield their domestic affairs and politics from outside interference. Would the conversation about the US that we might have been having recently been different if they had developed a progressive digital sovereignty policy under a democratic government? Perhaps. Now they are banning Chinese applications and enabling a mode of digital governance that resembles China's digital sovereignty through forms of executive order. China's model has won, in a sense. It has spread, and the potential for surveillance and repression is ever greater. But there are multiple paths. The future of our digital lives and of our digital societies might be techno-authoritarianism. It might be techno-democracy, but it could also be a digital commons. And that is not defined by the US or China. They are just two points on a map. It is an open future. So while I am a big skeptic of how power has been used in China in relation to digital surveillance, leading to new modes of repression, I also strongly believe that we need to legislate for progressive forms of digital sovereignty to stop the potential for authoritarian creep, be it from China, from the US, from an oligarch who buys a social media company, or from elsewhere as well. That's all I'll say for now.
It's absolutely fascinating. Digital sovereignty, I just want to get this right in my mind. The problem that we have here in the West is where the internet and social media is being used to sort of poison political debate, to radicalize people, teenage suicide or whatever, you know, that whole raft of things. But we seem to have no policies on dealing with it. So if you take that element there and then what China's doing, which is sort of pretty much total control or a lot of control, where is a good place to meet in the middle, or is there no meeting in the middle?
I think there will definitely be somewhere to meet in the middle. Our choice not to do anything or to do limited things is a governance decision. We make the choice to abdicate responsibility and leave it to companies to govern themselves, for-profit companies to govern themselves. Many of those companies are based outside of the UK as well. So we have limited democratic or power over them as well. So there is a middle ground. What we see in the EU with GDPR, for instance, is one middle ground there. I hear people agree with GDPR. I hear people disagree. I've heard leading legal specialists in China say that they see the GDPR as a ideological representation of what they've been trying to do with digital sovereignty. And then they have also copied many aspects of GDPR and other EU laws for internal use as well. But we would not say that the EU and what China is doing are the same thing. So in this sense, it's neutral.
But is China ahead of this in the way that it's looked at it? It knows what it can and what it can't do, and what it should and what it shouldn't do, i.e. getting into the capillaries, I think, as Lord Bruce said, of society, and that they've actually spent more time on it than we have, and are in a better place to do stuff. Is that right?
For sure. The Chinese government and different parts of it are, as Lynnette sort of highlighted, I would say they are much further ahead in thinking about this and in imagining how to govern this. And that's also in part because when you have over in the UK anyway, or in the West, every time we've talked about having greater governance over social media platforms, the C word has come up: censorship. You cannot censor me. You cannot censor that. I know people who have been actively censored in a variety of ways, and enabling teenagers to not see malicious content that could have a terrible effect on them is not the same sort of censorship as I see occurring that leads to people I know being imprisoned in different contexts. So China is much further ahead of it. They have created legislative tools or ideas that could be employed in other contexts. It doesn't mean we'll do the same thing, but we have to look at what's been done right and look at what's been done wrong and see where do we want to go.
Can I just put you, I'll put these two questions together, but from Fun Sakya, can China also export the human intelligence aspect of its surveillance software and hardware, i.e. how to use and manage it? What are the limits on this, and how might it impact the replication of China's digital authoritarianism model abroad? And AJ Neji has a similar question. Which countries might be most receptive to China's digital authoritarianism model? You don't have to list all, but give us an idea.
Can China export the human capacity to manage it? It depends. With digital technologies or the internet, it depends what we mean by export. You can be, as we all know, somebody can be in China managing the affairs of Zimbabwe and providing digital assistance. It's already been happening with Russia. There have been high-level talks for over a decade between high-level Chinese technical engineers and policy officials and Russian policy officials. So yes, it can happen. It is happening both in the exporting of software and hardware and the technical expertise. They are all being exported. Which country might be most receptive to this? Maybe I'm being provocative, but right now, the United States. I think the United States is basically doing exactly what the Chinese government hope they do. They are going, there is no free internet anymore. We will ban if we don't like you politically. I would say when you have someone like Elon Musk, in the entire time period leading up to him buying Twitter, which became X, he was constantly saying how great WeChat is. I would say the people in power in the United States right now are potentially some of the people most receptive to this idea.
I think, thank you for that. And I noticed actually on your X account, you're pointing people towards blue sky, aren't you? So,
yeah.
So maybe that's what, thank you.
Subversive.
Subversive stuff. Our third speaker is Dr. Ariane Ollier-Malaterre from the University of Quebec in Montreal, specializing in digital regulation at work and life. Her latest book is Living with Digital Surveillance in China, Citizens' Narratives on Technology, Privacy and Governance. We all live in a highly watched world. How is China different? How do Chinese citizens make sense of and live with this digital surveillance? What impact does it have on its people? Our debate today, Xi's China, Emergence of a Modern Tech-Enabled Authoritarianism. Ariane Ollier-Malaterre, enlighten us.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the audience. I would like to share today findings from our research in China about how people live with digital surveillance when they are exposed to it on a daily basis. Just trying to move this slide now. Okay, very good. So digital surveillance, as we have discussed already, is not unique to China. It is a worldwide phenomenon. However, in China, people do leave a wealth of digital traces every day. This begins with the all-encompassing platforms such as WeChat that people use for almost everything as they go during their day. So, of course, to talk with friends and families, to check the news, to post and entertain themselves, to work. You know, WeChat is more used than email in China in many industries. To pay for transportation, to buy online, to book a show. You can also share a restaurant bill using WeChat, even give money to a beggar, pay your taxes. So apart from very elderly people and some foreigners, cash is not a thing in China. You use WeChat Pay or Alipay. There's also facial recognition cameras, as we have discussed. But again, it's not unique to China. You have lots of cameras in the UK as well. Real name registration, which means that everything that you do online is potentially traceable back to you. And then the local and the commercial social credit systems. And I fully agree with what Dr. Carwyn Morris said. There's a lot of myths going on with, Big Brother and algorithmic social credit systems. That is not what recent research is showing. They are fragmented. They consist in black or red list, not scores. And there's a lot of manual entry going on here. So my research question, again, trying to move. Okay, good. My research explores how Chinese citizens make sense of digital surveillance and how they live with it. To what extent do they notice digital surveillance in their daily lives? How do they feel regarding that exposure? Do they change their behaviors in anticipation of it? What role does the context play in what they say and their surveillance imaginaries? This research was published in a book that's available if you want to know more, and with all your usual merchants. It's been edited in the UK. My background is not in sinology, not in Chinese studies. It is in sociology and technology. And the data is based on an extensive research diary and interviews that I have conducted in China. So let me walk you through the findings. Again, trying to move the slides here. I don't know, Vinit, if you could, right, thank you so much. So what I found is that the way participants make sense of digital surveillance is through a cohesive system of moral narratives, and taken together, that system casts surveillance as a solution to China's problems. You may know that quantitative surveys have found high support for digital surveillance in China. What they haven't explained is the reasons why, and also they haven't shown the other side of the medal, which I'm about to discuss as well. So what this system of moral narratives does is that it foregrounds problems of China, and specifically 3 anguishing narratives of moral shortcomings that taken together produce shame and fear and anguish. And in response to these 3 narratives, you have 2 redeeming narratives that act as an antidote. So 2 narratives of digital protection by the government and by technology. And if you take them together, then you understand that digital surveillance is framed, at least in people's discourse, and that is very important, as indispensable in as big and chaotic a country as China. So what are these anguishing narratives? Very quickly, the first one is the lack of moral quality in China. Many of the people that I talked to lamented that their fellow citizens were not able to follow the rules, that they behaved as children, and therefore you had to treat them as children and punish them. And hence you needed rules and punishment and surveillance to ensure moral progress. The second one was the century of national humiliation. So that's a very classic trope in Chinese national memory, which is different from the national history. It's what sinologists call the culture of insecurity, or a civilization complex. It's the notion that China has been humiliated by foreign powers since after the Opium Wars and the Japan invasions. And it continues with the fears of being undermined and attacked on the international scene, but also from within by the Muslim populations. So this idea that China was glorious and then humiliated and needs to regain its position on the international scene. And the third one is a view of privacy as somewhat different from how we define it in Western countries. So privacy as hiding shameful information and therefore suspicious. Privacy defined in relation to face saving and an escape from social judgment. So if someone who wants privacy, someone who has something to hide and is therefore suspicious. So if you weave these 3 narratives together, you understand that people are made to feel fear and shame, and they want solutions to save China from these moral shortcomings. And the solutions are here. The solutions are the government, the central government that provides protection and order, so parental figure that can protect people from the chaos and the moral insufficiencies. And then you have technology as a magic bullet, so techno-optimism as we know it in Western countries as well. But here it's very particular. They see technology as a civilizing force that can redress people's morality and uproot secrecy. So taken together, you see China, digital surveillance is framed as indispensable. Trying to move the slide once again. Here, thank you. But the other side of the medal is the intra-individual tensions that are really huge, because on the one hand, you have these discursive imaginaries of surveillance as indispensable, but on the other hand, you have the huge mental and emotional weight. So you have people who build self-protective rationales. They try to dissociate themselves from surveillance, saying, for instance, it does not target me because I am a small potato, or I am a good person. Surveillance is for criminals. I'm not a criminal. Or they say, so far, it hasn't hurt me. So they build these psychological mechanisms to protect themselves. They also express misgivings, objections, such as dislike, resentment, worries, frustration. I had some participants very angry about surveillance. They said, it makes me feel like a mouse in a lab experiment. So you have this coexistence, which is very paradoxical, of people saying surveillance is good for China. However, I don't like it, and I am trying to forget about it. So they framed digital surveillance as indispensable, but at the same time, they feared exposure, and they tried to convince themselves that they were not personally exposed to it. So if I could move slide, please. There's a range of mental tactics. I don't think I have time today, but you have them in the book as of how people try to dissociate themselves from surveillance. And so in the book, what you have is a short literature review on privacy and surveillance in the West and China. Then you have these anguishing narratives that I detail with lots of excerpts from the people. So you will see their voice expressed there. And then the redeeming narratives. And I also address how I, as a qualitative researcher interviewing in China as a foreigner as well, dealt with self-censorship, which was, of course, an interesting thing as well in the interviews. I will leave it here, and I hope you will want to know more in the book. Thank you.
Ariane, thank you very, very much for that. A couple of questions have come in. I'm going to link them together because I think they're right on what you were saying. And then if you can answer them, then I want to go back to the panel because they're actually quite fascinating. Ritesh S. Nigam says, could China's digital model govern how people feel and therefore exercise psychological control? You've touched on that a bit, but a follow-up one from Mohammed Ishmael. Predictive analytics is used to identify potential threats and can result in the preemptive detention of certain individuals. How might this impact certain minority groups and political pressure groups in China and elsewhere? Give us your thoughts on that.
So yes, surveillance can absolutely make people feel in different ways than without surveillance. And that is true for other countries as well. Things such as anticipatory obedience have been identified in Western research. So when you know that you are under surveillance, of course, you monitor your own behaviors, and you may also self-censor a lot. And what I have seen in the interviews is a lot of inability to speak, and that was in the body language. You see it very, very clearly. People opening their mouths and closing it, and they haven't said a word. So that is a thing, absolutely. About predictive analytics. So my research focuses on how people live with it. It doesn't focus on digital infrastructure per se. But what I would like to say is that there are very efficient digital tools, including predictive, for instance, in the police cloud, that are important in China. But the most important tool is not the social credit systems. And it's debatable, how much predictive policing is going on, and it's debatable how algorithmic this may be.
Yes, I think maybe that is something for the future. Let us open up to the fellow panelists now to take that idea. Carwyn, you mentioned about the sort of taking people through where the cameras go and everything for surveillance. But don't we do that here? If you go to an airport, you have to go through a duty-free shop, and they're going to facially recognize you and see how you shop things. So just sum up a little bit and talk about this digital model that has psychological control.
Well, I mean, I would say that one thing I like to highlight when I talk with people doing consumerism in China, which consumerism and pleasure and the pleasant online environment cannot be disconnected with what we're talking about, because what has been created are pleasant playgrounds that people can go into, but when they're in there, you will be seen what's happening. So I think what we just talked about with the construction of environments and things like that, yes, that is happening everywhere. But again, and Lynnette has talked about this in her previous work, that China has massive government capacity right now. It can construct or reconstruct or pay people or outsource modes of repression. And due to a certain amount of capacity, I would say this is happening more commonly in China than is going on elsewhere, well, at least in the UK. So yes, this is a widespread problem.
Can I just put that to Lynnette with the outsourcing and the capacity, predictive analytics, psychological control?
What about it?
Well, I mean, is this going to be a growing industry in China or elsewhere where you can have your predictive analytics and you can psychologically control people?
I think right now most of it is used for consumerism, for consumer purposes. The state is using it for social control purposes. I think both things are going on. Whether or not in the future it will be used for psychological manipulation, I wouldn't rule that out. But right now, I don't see much evidence pointing to that just yet.
And predictive analytics, are we there yet on that?
I think on the consumer front, definitely.
Yes, but on the sort of social control front, not quite.
Well, if you take DD, which is like the equivalent of Uber every day to work, I think the company and by extension the state can very much predict your movement on an everyday basis. Also, they can track you very, very easily. So one day, if you decide to go elsewhere, if you're a government official, you might get in trouble because they could see that you are on an outlier path compared to your usual self.
Okay,
and that has actually happened.
Thank you. Now's the time we're going to turn to the Democracy Forum Chair, Barry Gardiner, who's been listening into this and will tell us how much progress we've made. And then after that, I want to come back to the three of you to give us a final end thought. But Barry, over to you.
Well, I don't know how much progress you've all made. I found this very confusing, I have to confess.
Are you still there, Barry? Barry is no audio. So until we... Are you with us, Barry? We're not hearing you. Are you back with us, Barry? No. Lynnette, fill in for Barry for the moment. He found it confusing. Why did he find that confusing?
Because it's a dystopian world and technology keep on developing. So we don't actually know what's going to happen in the future. So like in the West, we are grappling with the human implications of AI, that it could allow people to commit suicide and in a way, encourage teenagers to commit suicide. We don't actually know what way technology is going and how it will allow the state to do what it wants to do in the authoritarian world.
Do you agree with Carwyn that China's thought about it more, is way ahead of us on it?
I think so. I agree with that. I think China has put in a lot of effort into developing innovation technology and think about its political implications.
Okay. Barry, are you back with us?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
Yes, we would. Lynnette was just explaining why you were so confused, but you can pick up from there.
Well, I'm glad you could explain my confusion. I found what you were saying about the procurers and the whole methodology in which this went in layers fascinating. But what really got me about the things you were saying was this idea that first you get a warning, then there's an assessment of risk and how much of a threat you might be to stability. And then there's interventions such as case handling, you said, correction of falsehoods, and the need to reassure people that what somebody had said was really not legitimate, which sounds a lot like the stuff that we sometimes now get on X. saying this has been disputed, or actually it's a load of old cobblers. I thought what Charles said at the beginning, that China sees this as an idealized future to head towards, was interesting. And he said that social control was at unprecedented levels. When you were talking, Carwyn, about the system functions well to enable surveillance, I was amazed that you were saying they can physically manipulate the streets to ensure that you go through data points where you'll be logged and collected, and the legal issues, the technology, you said, is relatively neutral, but the abuse is built in around the acceptance by the majority. And I think where Ariane absolutely got me focused was this is actually about privacy. And privacy is the hiding of shameful information. Why do we have a private life? Is it because things that we do are shameful, or is it because we have a right not to have others manipulate us through access to all the information that pertains to us? And that's a very difficult balance to engage, because of course, how would they manipulate unless there was something there that you felt likely in some way was shameful? But the way in which you said people rationalize it, minimize it, deny it, I don't matter, how it limits their scope, in a sense, their vision, and the fatalism, I can't do anything, so they can't really care about me. But in fact, we're creating an environment where the whole mass of data means that they are manipulating all of us all of the time. And how chilling it was, told by Carwyn, that you can actually erase somebody's identity after prison, and just, as it were, recreate their digital persona. So I think there's all sorts of very deep philosophical questions here around privacy. I mean, you go back to Plato, Gyges' ring, and what would you do if nobody would find that it was you that was doing it? And what is it to be a good human being? But China seems to put that in the context of what is it to have a stable, and in order to have a stable society, it feels it control everybody into being good human beings. And that creates all sorts of philosophical questions about freedom of the will, privacy. Humphrey, you wanted 2 minutes to go back to your panel.
Barry, but since you are sitting at the heart of the mother of all democracies, is this a conversation you have with your colleagues, or as Carwyn says, are we way behind?
I think we are way behind. Look, the UK, as well, has gone down the American route here of taking step by step, rather than going down the European Union, which is banning certain practices. I look at what's going on with the freedom that citizens have in the United States, in which information and those big tech giants are manipulating people's data and people's opinions. And I fear that that is incredibly troubling. And I then wonder to myself, who do I trust more? Do I trust the Elon Musks of this world, or do I trust my government more? And the answer would be, for God's sake, don't trust any of them.
Well, I'm going to leave us with that very depressing thought, but I want to come back to our panel to go around just to give us a top line of what you think we should take away from this debate. From Barry, we've got don't trust any of them, a choice between the tech giants of Silicon Valley and the Chinese Communist Party by the sounds of it. But Lynnette Ong, give us a takeaway thought.
So I think, an alternative to not doing all this fine-tuning and outsourcing, what the Chinese government could actually do is to shut down the internet. So whenever there are sensitive posts, they would delete everything. I think that would make life a lot more miserable. And the very fact that they have invested so much effort and money into fine-tuning and providing this tailor-made solution is because they do realize that public opinion matters and they want some sort of discussion going on. So I'm actually a little bit more pessimistic than Barry. I wouldn't trust everybody, but I have faith in, they are actually doing their best. They do realize that public opinion can provide good things to the party state, but it could also be very bad and very destabilizing. And they are trying to strike a balance between the two.
That's a great point. Carwyn Morris, your final thought.
Sure. I feel like I should probably leave Russell Square and pop over to Westminster to have a chat with Barry. But I would say learn from the US, learn from China, and we have the capacity to do it differently. We just need to have the will to do it differently.
The will to do it. That's going to come through Parliament and government. Ariane, Ollier-Malaterre, give us your final thought for the debate.
Yeah, I think we should not other China and feel safe in our, Western liberal democracies by demonizing the authoritarian Chinese regime, because I do think digital authoritarianism is a global possibility of threat. And we should really take action to regulate more. Yes.
Okay. Regulate. Thank you very much. The Times Wing Chariot is attacking us. Thank you for your insightful arguments and insights, Lynnette Ong, Carwyn Morris, Ariane Ollier-Malaterre. Our next Democracy Forum debate is at 2 p.m. London time on Tuesday, October the 28th. American aspirations in Afghanistan. That's a change. What are they? President Trump recently said that America wanted control back of the Bagram Air Base near Kabul. Until then, from all of us at the Democracy Forum, stay safe and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
The Democracy Forum is a not-for-profit organization founded in 2009 under the patronage of Baroness Nicholson of Winterbourne. Its principal goal was to work for the furtherance of democracy, peace and the rule of law in order to counter religious fundamentalism and intolerance in our global communities. In an increasingly fractured world, this goal continues to be the driving force behind all of the Forum's activities. Lord Charles Bruce is the current president of the Forum. Since its inception, the Forum has hosted and co-hosted seminars on a wide variety of topics relating to democracy and human rights across the world. The Democracy Forum encourages academics, students, journalists and other socially and politically conscious people to attend our seminars and to participate in the question and answer session. Details are available on our website, thedemocracyforumlimited.com.